The Daystrom Institute is a separate entity to Starfleet, but intrinsically tied to that organisation as part of the Federation. Essentially, it is a research and development division that stands apart from Starfleet R&D. I have a separate video exploring that here, but this video is looking into the Daystrom Station vaults that are home to many projects from all over the galaxy. We got a good inside look at the station in Picard Series 3, as well as a myriad of its stored projects, hoarded away for study and kept secret. Spoilers for that series will be in this video. Section 31 had a large hand in acquiring these artifacts and technologies, and at this stage of the United Federation of Planets, 2401, it was considered a part of Starfleet intelligence and seems to no longer work outside of Starfleet's jurisdiction. Whether that means Section 31 is being reformed, held accountable, or Starfleet intelligence has stooped to their level is a topic for another video. Either way, Daystrom Station is home to numerous projects that could be devastating in the wrong hands or paradigm changing if replicated successfully. The station itself is not hidden, but it does count as a black site and is protected by two Echelon-class cruisers, the USS Sternbach NCC 97942 and the USS Cole NCC 97621. These vessels were equipped with tracing weapons that are notable for leaving a marker suitable for tracking a tagged target. Although they may have simply been on patrol nearby, it still stands to reason the station would be protected by some guarding force. However, it is not the only defence. There is an artificial intelligence that protects the station too, known as the M510, which itself is a marvel of design and a new addition to the system over the last 2 years. The system was basically a compilation of Noonien Soong's research continued by Alton Soong. Although the project was incomplete, it saw an amalgamation of previous Soong-type android minds, from Lull, Data, Law, B4, and even imprints of the Soongs themselves, placed into a golem body, a synthetic shell that closer resembled the human than a general Soong-style frame. This amalgam, however, did not fully incorporate its multiple profiles, so effectively remained unstable and inactive. It was instead placed as the watchdog for the station, where it was able to observe all the comings and goings. Internally, the station's narrow corridors are outfitted with full coverage of holographic projectors, and the safeties could be disabled, allowing for deadly force. So, with the security system itself being one of the most advanced minds ever created over several generations of work, what else is contained within the vaults and labs of this shady site? Well, continuing the theme of synthetic developments, the XO3 android duplicator was a system discovered in 2266 by the Enterprise and was created by the natives of that world. It can duplicate an organic body, complete with mind and limited emotional range, as an artificial one. Such an implement would of course be of interest to Daystrom, which always pioneered AI research and robotics. It was also far from the only such an advanced artifact in this field that they possessed. They also had the Uritan androids in one of their vaults. These were created to house the minds of the surviving Uritans, a species from 600,000 years ago. These androids were created with their assistance to house their forms after surviving the loss of their civilization and never used. Still, this was an incredibly advanced species, and I wonder just what the Federation has learned from studying such an android. The station also has had the habit of hoarding remains of interest, it seems, for various reasons. Among the vaults are the biological remnants of the Sporocystian lifeforms, likely the Nacine, known as the Caretaker, as that was kept aboard the USS Voyager. Well, this being was immensely powerful in itself and could survive in subspace, and was from another galaxy altogether. It could also be used to detect others of its kind. There were also the remains of Captain Jean-Luc Picard, his human ones anyway, after he perished from Irumodic syndrome in 2399. While his mind was transferred to a new golem body, the original body was acquired by Section 31 for unknown reasons, but clearly to study some link that they were aware of. that he was not. It was not the only Enterprise captain they had, however. They also had the battered remains of James T. Kirk. Kirk was buried atop the mound on Viridian 3 by Picard, who gave him a best send-off as he could, but it appears his remains were recovered by Project Phoenix. This project is a nod to a series of books where Kirk was indeed revived, and as the name would suggest. And even if it failed in the Prime timeline, it looks like the idea was attempted. Who knows, maybe one day they would revive the Federation's most famous captain. They also had the remains of the Borg Queen that was killed by Data and Picard in the time travel incident of 2373 to 2063. This was the first Queen encountered by the Federation, but not the last, considering the hive mind of the collective. Borg technology is always a high priority for Starfleet, considering its advanced nature drawn from thousands of civilizations, and as morbid as its acquisition was. The remains of one of the most advanced cybernetic creatures is clearly a prize, and not only might yield results into the UFP's own cyber programs, but also deliver possible insight into how the collective operates. To this end, there is also a salvaged Borg vinculum from any number of Borg debris. This device was the heart of a local hive mind on a Borg vessel and the hub of their linked consciousness. Once again, it is very advanced technology and a trove of information on how the Borg work. They are, however, rather dangerous and have had numerous safeguards, especially around former drones who are still susceptible to their calls and influence when active. Of course, there are also the sorts of advanced technologies that Starfleet does not want anyone else to acquire for whatever reasons, the sort of things you would expect to find at such an institution. There is the Thaleron Generator that was installed aboard the IRW Scimitar, which was an illegal device. The Thaleron radiation is rather powerful, and was used to power the entire Riemann flagship under the command of Praetor Shinzon in 2379. But such reactors are banned for their lethal radiation that reduced any exposed to stone-like dust. Such a reactor can easily double as a devastating weapon, so it was outlawed by several treaties, but Shinzon did not exactly care. It looked like the reactor was recovered post-Star Trek Nemesis and sequestered away, considering it was devised by the Romulans, not the UFP. I suspect the UFP was looking for a defense. Talking of devices that can be misused, there was also a device labelled Genesis 2. This appears to be a successor to Carol Marcus's Genesis project, which could terraform an entire planet in hours. The project was highly classified, and the subject of a Klingon operation, as well as the renegade Khan's attack of vengeance and opportunity in 2285. The initial prototype was consumed in the formation of the unstable Genesis planet, formed around the collapsed Mutara Nebula, but the project is clearly too valuable to simply be left alone. Over a century later, however, we have yet to see this form of terraforming at play, likely because it can also be used to overwrite an existing ecosystem with its runaway reforming of matter. Therefore, a planet-scale weapon. I can understand the Federation not publicising such a device, even if they did ever use it. There were also several archives of information from other cultures, notably the RCA Archive that contained collections of their mythology and history, and now all that remains of that civilization. Aside from the untapped additions to history that these records hold, they're also rather unintentionally dangerous, as they have a habit of co-opting Starfleet's technology, such as transporters and replicators, to modify and retell these events through the transmuting of their surroundings. As the archives themselves are as large as a station, I suspect these are instead digital copies of the information extracted from the probe, although much could be learned from the RCA technology in the fields of cyber warfare or even terraforming. Another archive was the Catan Probe. This too contained the last memories and events of an existing civilization from the planet Catan, specifically the Resic region. This probe was launched with the lifetime memories of an individual called Cayman, and would impart the entire life story in first person to a compatible mind. Such technology was something beyond current Federation levels, although similar experience-imparting devices have been encountered before. The probe managed to convey its legacy to Jean-Luc Picard in 2368. There was also the Pup Probe. This is an unusual one, as the probe itself was possibly of Certifiably origin according to its description, but was generally unremarkable aside from the living code inside of it. The Pup program was rather basic and equated to a puppy by Miles O'Brien, hence the name. It ended up in the computer core of Deep Space Nine, vacating the probe, where it presumably still resides to this day, playing with a backup folder of the station's core and in a symbiotic relationship with the system. The living code is likely the more interesting aspect of this artifact, but with that being embedded in another system, the probe that carried it looks to be the next best thing to study. There was also a quantum tunneling portal device that permitted the short-range creation of portals. Originally designed as a form of transportation, it looks to have been constructed into a weaponized prototype and since classified in the vault, understandably. The device was stolen in 2401, however. There is also a shipment of Chemocyte, which is a commonly traded but illicit commodity. It has a variety of applications, but historically has seen use as part of a weapon component in the Xindi sphere. It's also unstable, and can interact with warp fields to cause unintended time travel, and as such is regulated by the Federation. Presumably, its presence in Daystrom is for Starfleet to continue to attempt to master this temperamental material. There is also a series of explosive mines discovered in 2366 constructed by the Canonians that resulted in the death of Lieutenant Marla Astor. These devices are left over from a civil war, and Starfleet was not the intended target, merely a casualty of a long-ended conflict. A tragedy, for sure, but compared to some of the items here, a fairly tame find. There is also the confiscated probability device seen on DS9 in 2370. Well, these items seemingly altered the very laws of probability, which is a pretty crazy level of manipulation for such a small item. Worryingly, the device was easily replicable, and while the copies were destroyed, it looks like the original was seized by Starfleet for the reality-bending influences it can have when deployed en masse. Considering this item is already copyable and its origin a mystery, it's probably one of the largest issues in here. Finally, we have a genetically modified tribble, which seems to have been given tendrils and teeth, as if they were not bad enough with their bottomless appetite and rapid reproduction rate. Carnivorous ones would be far worse. Some mad scientist out there thought it a good idea to break the Federation's terms on genetic modification and create this monstrosity. Glad it's under lock and key. Also, there is a crate of self-sealing stem bolts. Maybe they just need to know how they self-seal, or just how useful they really are, truly. A great mystery. So, that is some of the shown contents inside the Daystrom Station's vaults. All this gear is stored here to study and contain for various reasons, but all of it is important to Starfleet. What do you think would be a galaxy-changing item should it be released to the greater galactic community? I've been Rick. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time for another lore video. Until then, thanks again, and goodbye.